وعيشي كارا ورزقي دارا واجعل لي عند قبر رسولك وصلى الله عليه وآله مستقرا وقرارا.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله ربي من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه. محسن قد أتاك المصيب. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر. ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر. تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر. سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده.
الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده.
الله أكبر. بحول الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. لا إله إلا الله الحليم الكريم. لا إله إلا الله العلي العظيم. سبحان الله رب السماوات السبع ورب الأراضين السبع وما فيهن ما بينهن ورب العرش العظيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين. يا الله يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده.
سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده.
الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده.
الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. الله سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. الله سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. الله استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده.
سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده.
الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم إنا نسألك راحة عند الموت والمغفرة بعد الموت والعفو عند الحساب. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والنجاة من النار ومن كل بلية والفوز بالجنة والرضوان في دار السلام وجوار نبيك محمد عليه وآله السلام. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك، لا إله إلا أنت، أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح. حي على خير العمل. حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة. قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله ربي من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه يا محسن قد أتاك المسيء. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفر إنه كان توابا. الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده.
سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده.
الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده.
الله أكبر. بحول الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم ادخلنا في كل خير أدخلت فيه محمدا وآل محمد وأخرجنا من كل سوء أخرجت منه محمدا وآل محمد وصل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده.
سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده.
الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده.
الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده.
سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده.
الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده.
الله أكبر. بحول الله. الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده.
سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده.
الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا جليل ارحم عبدك الذليل. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. اللهم صل. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إنه ليس لي علم بموضع الرزق، وإنما أطلبه بخطرات تخطر على قلبي، فأجول في طلبه البلدان، فأنا فيما أنا طالب كالحيران، لا أدري في سهل هو أم في جبل، أم في أرض أم في سماء أم في بر أم في بحر، وعلى يدي من ومن قبل من، وقد علمت أن علمه عندك وأسبابه بيدك، وأنت الذي تقسمه بلطفك وتسببه برحمتك. اللهم فصل على محمد وآله، واجعل يا ربي رزقك لي واسعا، ومطلبه سهلا، وما أخذه قريبا، ولا تعنني بطلب ما لم تقدر لي فيه رزقا، فإنك غني عن عذابي وأنا فقير إلى رحمتك. فصل على محمد وآله، وجد على عبدك بفضلك إنك ذو فضل عظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا حبيب الله وخاتم النبيين، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين الشهيد بكربلاء، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا تسعة المعصومين من ذرية الحسين، علي بن الحسين زين العابدين ومحمد بن علي الباقر وجعفر بن محمد الصادق وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم وعلي بن موسى الرضا ومحمد بن علي الجواد وعلي بن محمد الهادي والحسن بن علي العسكري. السلام عليك يا حجة الله يا ابن الحسن يا صاحب العصر والزمان، عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك، وجعلنا من أعوانك والأنصارك والمستشهدين بين يديك. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.
औज़ु बिल्लाहि मिनश्शैतानिर्रजीम बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। मजलिस का आगाज़ इन अशार के साथ। मकसूद हल अता है शहे ला फ़ता अली, मतलूब आफरीनिशे अर्ज़ो समा अली। जिस तरह एक ज़ात मोहम्मद है बेमिसाल, पैदा कोई हुआ नहीं दूसरा अली। बेदम यही तो पाँच हैं मकसूद कायनात, खैरुन्निसा हुसैन व हसन मुस्तफ़ा अली। बावाज़ बुलंद सलवात। अब मैं अली मोहसिन से रिक्वेस्ट करूँगा कि वो आके अपना सलाम पेश करें। अली मोहसिन, बावाज़ बुलंद सलवात।
सलवात।
राहों में सारे बाँको, छाँव में लीना साया। राहों में सारे बाँको, छाँव में लीना साया। बेताब धूप में है जंजीर का सताया। राहों में सारे बाँको, छाँव में लीना साया। उजड़े घरों में गूंजी आवाज़ हाय अकबर। उजड़े घरों में गूंजी आवाज़ हाय अकबर। सुगरा को जब फूफी ने रोकर गले लगाया। राहों में सारे बाँको, छाँव में लीना साया। जाना कचहरियों में छूटा न बीबियों का। जाना कचहरियों में छूटा न बीबियों का। ऐसा किसी अदू ने दरबार में बुलाया। परदेसियों की कब्रों में तुर्बते सकीना। परदेसियों की कब्रों में तुर्बते सकीना। किसने है फूल डाले, किसने दिया जलाया। ज़ैनब के सर में अब तक है रेत करबला की। ज़ैनब के सर में अब तक है रेत करबला की। रसी ने बाजुओं में काला निशान बनाया। राहों में सारे बाँको, छाँव में लीन साया। पहचान लेना सुगरा अब अपने कारवां को, पहचान लेना सुगरा अब अपने कारवां को। इस काफिले में बीबी कोई नहीं पराया। राहों में सारे बांको छाँव में लीन साया। कहते हैं मंजिलों पे माओ से रोके बच्चे, कहते हैं मंजिलों पे माओ से रोके बच्चे। अम्मी वतन मदीना के अब तलक न आया। राहों में सारे बांको छाँव में लीन साया। सलवात।
माशाअल्लाह अली। अब मैं दरख्वास्त करूँगा अली रज़ा से कि वो आके अपना सलाम पेश करें। अली रज़ा बावाज़ बुलंद सलवात। कर रहा है ये रावी बयां कर बला, कर रहा है ये रावी बयां कर बला। उसने आशूर की शब का मंजर लिखा, सीनाए शाह पर बिन्त शाहे हुदा। और शबीर कहते हैं ये बारहा, हमको जाना है कल करने वादा वफा। तुम पे आ जाएगा सब्र का मरहला। बात सारी सकीना ने शह की सुनी, और जवाबन वो बस इतना कहती रही, अच्छा बाबा सुलाने तो आओगे ना, रोज चेहरा दिखाने तो आओगे ना। बोल शबीर है मेरी नूरे नजर, तुमको करना है अब शाम तक का सफर। तुमको कैदी बनाएंगे अब अहल शर। बोली शहजादी मुझको नहीं कोई डर, तुम कहो तुम सुलाने तो आओगे ना, रोज चेहरा दिखाने तो आओगे ना। शाह कहने लगे ऐ मेरी लाडली, तुम पे आएगी अब शामियों की घड़ी, आग दामन में होगी तुम्हारे लगी। बोली वो फिक्र मुझको नहीं है कोई, मेरा दामन बुझाने तो आओगे ना। रोज चेहरा दिखाने तो आओगे ना। मुस्तरब दिल से कहने लगे शाहिदी, तेरी किस्मत में बेटी सुकून अब नहीं। अब तमाचे लगाएगा शिमरे लई। सुन के ये बात कहने लगी वो हज़ीं, शिम्र से तुम बचाने तो आओगे ना। रोज चेहरा दिखाने तो आओगे ना। बढ़ती जाती थी बेचैनी शबीर की, हर सितम वो उठाने पे राजी हुई। जिंदा बाबा न होंगे समझ ना सकी, सुन के सब मुश्किलें बस वो कहती रही। घर में रूठी मनाने तो आओगे ना। रोज चेहरा दिखाने तो आओगे ना। लिख के सलमान दिल फट रहा है मेरा, हाय शब हाय जब शाह वाला ने रोकर कहा, अब तो जिंदान मरकद बनेगा तेरा। बेटी साबिर की थी बोली वो साबिरा, मेरा लाशा उठाने तो आओगे ना। रोज चेहरा दिखाने तो आओगे ना। अच्छा बाबा सुलाने तो आओगे ना। रोज चेहरा दिखाने तो आओगे ना। दुरूद पढ़ते मोहम्मद वाले। माशाअल्लाह अली। अब मैं दरख्वास्त करूँगा जनाब मोहसिन नदीम साहब से कि वो आके अपना कलाम पेश करें। जनाब मोहसिन नदीम साहब बावाज़े बुलंद सलवात।
बढ़िए सर बढ़िए सर अल्लाह। अफसोस नबी ज़ादियों का शाम में जाना, सजाद से पूछो। अफसोस नबी ज़ादियों का शाम में जाना, सजाद से पूछो। सर नंगे वो माँ बहनों का दरबार में जाना, सजाद से पूछो। छुपती थी नबीज़ादी, नबीज़ादी के पीछे किस शर्मो हया से, और शिम्र का उन बीबियों के नाम बताना, सजाद से पूछो। बैठे हुए दरबार में सब छोटे बड़े थे, सादात खड़े थे। सरतश्त में रखा हुआ ज़ैनब को दिखाना, सजाद से पूछो। जब दोख्तर शबीर ने जिंदा में कज़ा की, आफत की घड़ी थी, वो नन्ही सी मैयत बंधे हाथों से उठाना, सजाद से पूछो। जब गुस्ल सकीना को वहाँ दे चुकी गसार, था सबका बुरा हाल। उस नन्ही सी मैयत पे निशान रस्सी के पाना, सजाद से पूछो। अफसोस नबीज़ादियों का शाम में जाना, सजाद से पूछो। सलावत अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली।
माशाअल्लाह मोहसिन। कैसे ज़ैनब को ज़माने ने खुले सर देखा, कैसे ज़ैनब को ज़माने ने खुले सर देखा, जिसको गाजी ने भी नजरें न उठा के देखा। तीर का ज़ख्म कहाँ याद रहा असगर को, माँ को जब शाम में खाते हुए पत्थर देखा। कम न थी शिम्र के खंजर से नज़र लोगों की, कम न थी शिम्र के खंजर से नज़र लोगों की, शहने नेज़े से बहन को तहे खंजर देखा। बावाज़ बुलंद सलवात। अब मैं जनाब नासिर रिजवी साहब से गुजारिश करूँगा कि वो अपने कलाम पेश करें। जनाब नासिर रिजवी, बावाज़ बुलंद सलवात।
दरूद भेज दे मोहम्मद आले मोहम्मद। हो गई खत्म जफा असगर बेशीर के साथ हो गई खत्म जफा खुद सितम रोया है मिल मिल के गले तीर के साथ हो गई खत्म जफा दौड़ते जाते हैं शह अकबर दिलगीर के साथ दौड़ते जाते हैं शह अकबर दिलगीर के साथ जोर चलता नहीं तदबीर का तकदीर के साथ हो गई खत्म जफा नंगे पाले गए बीमार कोता शाम लईन नंगे पाले गए बीमार कोता शाम लईन बेड़िया पाँव की जंजीर के साथ हो गई खत्म जफा किस में दम था जोरदार लेता सरे ज़ैनब से किस में दम था जोरदार लेता सरे ज़ैनब से हाय अब्बास से दिलावर न थे हम शीर के साथ हो गई खत्म जफा साथ छोड़ा नहीं ज़ैनब ने कभी भाई का साथ छोड़ा नहीं ज़ैनब ने कभी भाई का सरबरहना फिर दर दर सर शबीर के साथ हो गई खत्म जफा असगर बेशीर के साथ खुद सितम रो के साथ हो गई खत्म जफा। दुरूद भेज दो मोहम्मद।
माशाअल्लाह नासिर। चंद ऐलानात। कल लेडीज़ मजलिस शाम 5 बजे यहाँ पे मुनक्किद होगी और उसको स्पॉन्सर किया जनाब इम्तियाज़ और सिस्टर बुशरा ने। मर्दाना मजलिस बाद नमाज मगरिबैन कल यहाँ पे उसका इन्नेकाद होगा। आप लोगों से दरख्वास्त है कि ज़रूर शिरकत करें। संडे स्कूल कल से शुरू है सुबह 10:30 से 12:30 बजे तक और एवरी सेकंड संडे ऑल्टरनेट संडेज़ को हुआ करेगा 10:30 से 12:30 बजे। अब मैं दरख्वास्त करूँगा जनाब बाबर भाई से, बाबर मेहदी आके अपना कलाम पेश करें बावाज़ बुलंद सलवा।
एक बार दूर पर दी मोहम्मद आले मोहम्मद।
ये कौन सी मस्तूर है, क्या मांग रही है। ये कौन सी मस्तूर है, क्या मांग रही है। इस्लाम की खिदमत का सिला मांग रही है। हर साहिबे गैरत से रिदा मांग रही है। परदेस में मरने की दुआ मांग रही है। दुरूद मोहम्मद आले मोहम्मद। वो खून रोके ये कहता रहा ज़माने से। वो खून रोके ये कहता रहा ज़माने से। रिदाएं छीनो ना, रिदाएं छीनो ना लोगों मेरे घराने से। वो खून रोके कहता रहा ज़माने से। सिवाल आब पैरों ले पे उसके सोने बे। सवाल आब पैरों ले पे उसके सोने पे। वो मारते थे, वो मारते थे सकीना को हर बहाने
दुरूद मोहम्मद आले मोहम्मद। एक बार फिर दुरूद पढ़िए।
मंजिले शाम कहाँ, इतरत शबीर कहाँ। मंजिले शाम कहाँ, इतरत शबीर कहाँ। हाय सजा दू तुझे ले आई तकदीर कहाँ। मंजिले शाम कहाँ, इतरत शबीर कहाँ। जुल्म का साया तो करबल से चला शाम तलक। जुल्म का साया तो करबल से चला शाम तलक। शाम बाजार कहाँ, ज़हरा की जागीर कहाँ। जुल्म का साया तो करबल से चला शाम तलक। शाम बाजार कहाँ, ज़हरा की जागीर कहाँ। हाय सजाद तुझे ले आई तकदीर कहाँ। कहा जालिम ने सैयद ज़ादी असर नंगे चलो। कहा जालिम ने सैयद ज़ादी असर नंगे चलो। जुल्म जालिम का कहाँ, ज़ैनब दिलगीर कहाँ। हाय सजाद तुझे ले आई तकदीर कहाँ। खुश्क था हल्क जो मासूम ने मांगा पानी। खुश्क था हल्क जो मासूम ने मांगा पानी। जुल्म का तीर कहाँ, असगर बेशीर कहाँ, हाय सज्जाद तुझे ले आई तकदीर कहाँ। इज़्न अब्बास को मिल जाता अगर करबल में, इज़्न अब्बास को मिल जाता अगर करबल में, फिर ये दरबार कहाँ, अब्बास की हमशीर कहाँ। हाय सज्जाद तुझे ले आई तकदीर कहाँ, मंजिले शाम कहाँ, इतरत शबीर कहाँ। दुरूद मोहम्मद आले मोहम्मद।
MashaAllah. Now I will request Maulana Bilal Hussain to come and address the Majlis, please. Maulana Bilal Hussain. Bawaz Buland Salwat.
رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وقال: إنما أشكو بثي وحزني إلى الله واعلموا من الله ما لا تعلمون. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات الله محمد وعلى محمد. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat is condolences to the master of our time, Sahib al-Asr wa zaman. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بذكرنا المسائب آل Muhammad. May Allah increase in our reward for the commemoration of the difficulties of Ali Muhammad. Before we begin, yesterday marked actually the passing of one of our leading Maraja of Najaf, Sayyid Muhammad Sa'id al-Hakim. Sayyid Muhammad Sa'id al-Hakim, who passed away at the age of 87, was one of the pious and most senior teachers of the Hawza of Najaf. And one of his attributes that he was known for was that he spent many years in prison. You see, the Hakim family was from Iraq. They are Iraqi people. So during the time of Saddam, this family was present in Iraq, and since he was the grandson of Sayyid Muhsin al-Hakim, they were known to be religious, pious people, and during the dawr of Saddam, he, along with many people, were in prison. And his attribute was such that even in prison, he would teach. And he made ulama. Even in prison, he would collect all of them and teach. So he became very noticeable in the eyes of the enemies of Islam. And as a consequence of this, he would be tortured. One of his attributes was that he never cried out when he was being tortured. Never once. That's why if you saw him in his life now, you would see that he looks very different than the rest of the Maraja. The rest of the Maraja, alhamdulillah, they looked fairly healthy, but Sayyid Sa'id al-Hakim was hunched over and looked like he was maybe only 4.5 feet tall. He couldn't stand up straight anymore, carry a cane, and he moved very slowly. He still had a lot of strength in him, but he was physically, he looked very weak. One of the stories about him was that when he was in prison, and they said, one of the guards took pity on him as they were torturing him, and they said, "Why don't you cry out? If you cry out, they'll let you go. They'll stop torturing you. They'll stop giving you a hard time." And Sayyid Sa'id al-Hakim famously said, he said that, "I am the teacher, I am the leader, I am the one who gives the strength to the others. If they see me cry, then all of these people will lose their hope." So Sayyid al-Hakim, Sayyid Sa'id al-Hakim, rahmatullah alayh, you took a lot of difficulties for the sake of Islam. But one of the things that was known about him was that even in his old age, every year, when the days of Muharram would come, he himself would hold a majlis of Imam al-Hussein. And it was one of the famous things in Najaf that you would get to go and listen to the marja recite the majlis of Imam Hussein. And it was something tabarrukan that people would gather in hundreds and hundreds into his office and into the places where they could to sit and to listen to the marja as he would recite the maqtal of Imam Hussein. The majlis of Imam al-Hussein, though Sayyid Sa'id al-Hakim, he raised his family and his entire clan, that there are many reciters from the Hakim family who recite the majlis of Imam Hussein. Many. He raised his children, his generations, in many languages around the world. They are noted for reciting the majlis of Imam Hussein. And say, "Yeah, but Sayyidina, you're old. You're 80, 85, 86, 87 he passed away. Why don't you leave this?" But the majlis of Imam al-Hussein is something that is our honor and is a source of barakat for us and a source of shafa'ah for us in akhirah. And the same way that he showed that I am the one who will not cry so that the people take strength from me, he set the example for us that if I participate in the majlis of Hussein, that no one after me should leave the majlis of Hussein. Surah Al-Fatiha. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. In these 2 nights that we have together, we'll inshallah discuss from the affairs of our 4th Imam for whose shahadat we have gathered to commemorate. In brief, as an introduction for our youth, our 4th Imam, his life was a period of 57 years. He was born in the year 38 after Hijrah, and he spent the first 3 years of his life in the care of his grandfather Imam Ali alayhi salam. The next 10 years of his life after the shahadat of his grandfather was under the imamat of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, and then after that was the 10 years he spent under the imamat of his father Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Imam Zainul Abidin, in the time of the event of Karbala in 61 after Hijrah, was the age of 23 years of age. He was married and he had a son. He was married to actually his cousin, the daughter of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. One of the unique honors that our 5th Imam possesses is that he is Sayyid from both sides. His father is the son of Imam Hussein and his mother
is the daughter of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. So Imam Zainul Abidin was married in the event of Karbala. He was there with his wife, as well as his son Imam Muhammad al-Baqir was present in the field of Karbala as well. It's narrated that Imam al-Baqir was somewhere between 3 and 5 years, most likely 3 to 5 years of age at the time of the event of Karbala. After the event of Karbala, my Imam's imamat begins at the age of 23. And it continues for a period of 34 years until the age of 57. Now there are many different points that need to be discussed about the life of this Imam, and it's always important to remember that these majalis are an introduction to an Imam, to his life, and to important lessons that we learn from the Ahlul Bayt. They're not a complete dialogue. We introduce a topic, we prepare for it, but the responsibility falls on each of us that we go afterwards and we learn. For example, there are important points that we'll just point to very quickly. One, for example, if you notice in Rabiul Awwal, when we pass the days of Azah, the last day of Azah typically is the Shahadat of our 11th Imam. And the next day, we celebrate Eid. That is the first day of the Imamat of the 12th Imam. And in general, the day that an Imam's Imamat starts is a happy day, is a happy occasion. But the dawr, the time of Imam Zainul Abidin was a very difficult time that you can imagine that the 11th of Muharram is not a day of celebration in any book. The Imam's Imamat begins in great difficulty. And there are lessons within this for us of understanding the role, the responsibility, and the importance of this Imam and what he accomplished for us. And inshallah, tomorrow night we'll go through 5 unique lessons that we learn from the life of Imam Zainul Abidin that are important for us to apply. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala. You guys can hear me, right? We're okay? Okay. I told you what we're going to talk about tomorrow night. Now let's talk about what we're going to talk about tonight. Imam Zainul Abidin's imamat that lasted for a period of 34 years. One of the things that he is most famously known for, that's better, that's good. Okay. One of the things that he is most famously known for is that this is the Imam who even our enemies attribute as the Imam who cried. And not just our enemies, even from amongst us, but amongst the enemies. There are many who, for example, when they look at the pages of history, they look at the biographies of the A'immah alayhimus salam, and there's even one who famously, in the dawr of ulama from al-Azhar, asked the question of the ulama of Najaf, and he says, why did you make this one an Imam? He has no accomplishment. Look at Hassan alayhi salam. He was a warrior, a mujahid, who then had to make peace for the sake of his people. Fine. Hussein went and fought. Al-Baqir went and taught. Ja'far went and taught to the extent that you are known as Ja'fari. But this, I don't understand why you made this one who all he did was cry. Now the reply to this individual, the alim from Najaf, he took Sayfa Sajjadiyah, mailed it to this individual, no answer needed. This person who questioned the role of Imam Zainul Abidin after reading Sayfa Sajjadiyah replied back, he says, I did not know who is Allah until I read the words of this Sajjad. So meaning that the enemies, if they should criticize the Imam for crying, we can show them the inheritance that we received. That the book of Sayfa Sajjadiyah is known as Zabur Ali Muhammad, the Psalms of Ali Muhammad. The way Dawood had a Zabur, that way we take a look at the writings of Imam Zainul Abidin as a Zabur. But it's not just the enemies who called that this Imam was one who cried. We see the riwayah from our 6th Imam, Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq alayhi salam, who makes a statement, Bakka'un khamsa. Fi tarikh al-insan, in the history of mankind, there are 5 who are known as the criers. The first of whom is Nabi Adam. Nabi Adam was the one who wept that when he was sent to earth, he cried at the separation from Allah, and he cried that he had been sent to earth, and he was known as the first of those who cried. The second is known as Yaqub. Nabi Yaqub alayhi salam was the one who, when Nabi Yusuf was lost to him in this world, he cried and cried and cried so much that he lost the sight of his eyes. The third of the criers that Imam Sadiq explains, he says, was Yusuf, the son of Yaqub, who was lost. Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, he would cry so much when he was in a period of his life, he was in prison. And we're not telling the story of Nabi Yusuf yet, but he would cry so much in prison that the prisoners would complain and say, "Yeah, but make him stop crying. We have no peace because of the crying of Yusuf." They would ask and beg the guards to make Nabi Yusuf cry because his crying was so impactful on them. Imam Sadiq explains, he says, the fourth of the criers was my mother, Fatima Zahra. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. You see, the weeping of Sayyidah Zahra is within itself a miracle and a secret of her unique status. We're getting away from the topic. You guys okay? You want to hear this? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. You see, Sayyidah Zahra was not a normal person. She is known as Hawra Insiya, the heavenly being in a human form. In her fadilat, her nur was something Allah reserved next to him until it was time for her to be born. When she was born, she was like nothing else. No other being in the history of the children of Adam is like Sayyidah Zahra. The consequence of this was that she was an angelic being in a human form. When she would cry, it would hurt your soul. There are narrations that say at the weeping of Sayyidah Zahra, the oceans want to break apart. And had it not been that Allah has put angels over these oceans to control them, this earth would have turned into the pit of hell at the weeping of Zahra. So after the shahadat of the Holy Prophet, when Sayyidah Zahra would want to cry, and she would cry. And one of the beauties of Sayyidah Zahra and her relationship with her father was rahmatul lil alameen. There is no better father. That the longer she was separated from her father, the more she would cry. Now normally when someone passes away or someone leaves us, you cry more in the beginning, and as time passes, your weeping decreases. But the perfection of the father and the daughter was such that the daughter, the longer she was separated from her father, the more her grief increased. And her weeping was such that, think about it, one person in the entire city of Medina, one person, her crying disturbed the entire city of Medina. To where they went to Imam Ali and they complained and they said, she cries day and night. Tell her to either cry in the day or cry in the night. We have no peace at the sound of the weeping of Zahra. That eventually Imam Ali went, and outside of Medina behind Jannatul Baqi, he built what is known as Baytul Ahzan, the house of sorrows. And in the morning he would take Sayyidah Zahra, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, and take them out so that Sayyidah Zahra could cry in peace. The fourth of the criers in the history of this world is this lady, Sayyidah Zahra, whose masa'ib are something that make our Imam weep till today. But Imam Sadiq continued, he says, the fifth of the criers is my grandfather Ali ibn al-Hussein, Zainul Abidin alayhi salam. Salawat ala Muhammad. So the attribute of the Imam being known as one who cries is not something that the enemies titled Imam Zainul Abidin as. Rather, Imam Sadiq explains the attribute of Imam Zainul Abidin as the one who wept. And very famously, he wept for the 34 years that he lived after the event of Karbala. To the extent where it's narrated that Abu Hamza Thumali, who we have the famous dua from, Dua Abu Hamza Thumali, was a companion of Imam Zainul Abidin who learned this dua from Imam Zainul Abidin. Comes to Imam Zainul Abidin, he says, until when will you cry? قَتَلْ لَكُمْ عَادَ وَكَرَامَتَكُمْ مِنَ اللَّهِ الشَّهَادَةِ. He goes to Imam Zainul Abidin when Imam Zainul Abidin is crying, and he says to him, he says, O son of the Prophet, till when will you cry? It's normal for the Banu Hashim, for you, the Sadat, that you are killed. Ada, normal. And it is a great honor from Allah that you attain Shahada. Because it would hurt his heart to see Imam Zainul Abidin crying all the time. Now the question that we want to answer today and that we want to look at today and understand today is, why did Imam Zainul Abidin cry? What was the purpose of his crying? You see, you and I can do something and it can be for our own personal satisfaction. It can be because I want to. It can be because I'd like to. But an imam is not a normal person. An imam, everything he says, everything he does, everything that he allows to exist around him is an authority over us for what Allah wants us to do. An imam is not a normal person. Imam doesn't have the attribute that he chooses to do something because he feels like it. Why? Because in every instance that we exist, Allah wants something from us. An imam is the perfect demonstration of what you need to do at any given point in time and what Allah wants from you. If, for example, we found ourselves in a situation that there are two responsibilities that I have and I needed to know which one is my priority, the first person I look to is my imam. And I see what does the imam instruct me to do, what is my priority to accomplish, and I learn and I understand how it is that I need to ensure that I am fulfilling the responsibility that Allah has given me. Therefore, the question that we're asking, why did the imam cry, is not because he felt like it. That's not something that exists with an imam, and one of the responsibilities that we have to understand is to understand the authority the imam has over us. And how do we make sure that we follow the example of the imam, because the example of the imam will always be something perfect for us. There's no way that an imam does something that is not the exact perfect thing. You guys okay? Nobody's falling asleep? All right. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Ya Ali. As long as you stay awake, I'll keep talking. If you go to sleep, I go to sleep. Okay? To understand the idea of why the imam cried, it's important to first understand why the imam did not, what was the reason that what is not the reason that he was crying. That's the way we should say. To look at the reason why he was not crying, we look at the story of Nabi Yaqub alayhi salam. Because as these are from amongst the 5 criers, we see the story of Nabi Yaqub and Nabi Yusuf, Allah has given us in the Quran. And when we look to understand the logic behind the imam, it won't be separate from the Quran. We can attach and understand from the Quran. To look at the story of Nabi Yaqub, we can look at Surah Yusuf, where Allah is telling us, He tells us of the best of stories for us to learn from. One of the things that we know that happens is that Nabi Yaqub has a son. He has many sons, he has 12 sons. One of them is named Yusuf. Yusuf was different than his brothers. He was a prophet of Allah. The rest of his brothers became jealous and threw him in a well and told their father, your son has been killed. And as far as they knew, Yusuf alayhi salam was dead. And then after a number of years, they proceed to Misr, they proceed to Egypt, and there Nabi Yusuf sees his brother Benjamin and takes Benjamin, and the brothers return to their father and tell him, we lost Benjamin. This is the mukhtasar, this is the simplified version of the story. But at this point in time, the huzn, the sorrow of Nabi Yaqub, Allah describes it in the Quran. And one of the things that He describes in the Quran is this verse number 86 of Surah Yusuf. قَالَ إِنَّمَا أَشْكُ بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. Says that Yaqub alayhi salam in this instance said that I don't complain to anyone, I only complain to Allah of my anguish and my sorrow. That my anguish and my sorrow is only for Allah. In this instance, it's said there are three narrations that associate from the tafasir of the Quran of what happens after this incident, that Nabi Yaqub cries and complains to Allah of his sorrows. You guys want to hear all three? We're good? Okay. First of the three comes from our fifth Imam, who says that after this incident where Allah is saying that قَالَ إِنَّمَا عَشْكُ بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ, Nabi Yaqub is making dua to Allah, and he makes dua to Allah and he says, oh Allah, send me Malikul Maut. I want to talk to Malikul Maut. Allah sends Malikul Maut. Malikul Maut comes to Nabi Yaqub and he says, Yaqub, you called for me, what do you want from me? Nabi Yaqub says, I have a question for you, O Malikul Maut. When you take the souls of people, do you take them all together or do you take them one by one? Malikul Maut replies, he says, oh Yaqub, I know every soul I take. I take every soul individually. So Nabi Yaqub asks Malikul Maut, he says, then tell me Malikul Maut, have you seen my son Yusuf? Malikul Maut says, I swear to Allah, no, I didn't see him. So Nabi Yaqub knows that his son Yusuf is alive from this. The second hadith in Tafsir al-Safi, which is narrated by our sixth Imam, says that Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, when he was in Misr, he was in charge of distributing the food and he was in charge of all of the food of Misr. And people would come and purchase and take food from him. And one of the people who came to him was an Arabi, was a Bedouin, a person who wanders through the desert. When this Bedouin came to Nabi Yusuf asked him, where are you going after this, or where are you going? And the Bedouin explained, and Nabi Yusuf said to him, on your way you're going to pass a valley. And in that valley you'll see this kind of a house. And in this kind of a house, when you pass by it, I want you to call out in salam, and a person with this description will come out. When he comes out, I want you to say to him that the trust that he gave to Allah is still present, and the promise that was made by Allah will be fulfilled. And this Bedouin goes, he comes to the valley, he remembers the message and the promise that he made. He calls out, and sure enough, out comes Nabi Yaqub. And the Bedouin says, I was in such and such place, and the Amir sent his salam to you. And Nabi Yaqub says, describe him to me. He says, I swear I've never seen one more beautiful than him. Nabi Yaqub knows that his son is alive. This is the second explanation. The third explanation comes from our holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That our Prophet explains that when Yaqub said, إِنَّمَا أَشْكُو بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ, that certainly I only complain to Allah, that Allah sent Jibra'il down to speak to Yaqub. And when Allah sent Jibra'il down to speak to Yaqub, Jibra'il said to Nabi Yaqub, he said, oh Nabi Yaqub, both of your sons are alive. And Allah swears that even if they had died, He would bring them back to life for you. Therefore, don't be sad and go and give charity to the most beloved of Allah, give charity to the poor. And the consequence of this was that Nabi Yaqub then, after this incident, would never be seen eating alone. Whenever he would eat, he would call the poor and sit with the poor people, because he had learned that they are the beloved servants of Allah. And that if he would be fasting, he would, when it was time to open his fast, would invite them to come and eat with him. In this way, Nabi Yaqub became patient in his trial. And the next part of the verse speaks, وَعَلَمُوا مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, and I know from Allah that which you do not know. Nabi Yaqub was given peace in this way. He was given instruction as well. That one, he says, I only complain to Allah of my sorrows. And two, that to give charity and to assist the poor. If we were to take a look at this example and look at the life of Imam Zainul Abidin, we would say that Imam Zainul Abidin has already been given instruction in the Quran of what he should be doing, that his complaint should only be to Allah, and that he should be caring for the poor. And certainly enough, we would say that Imam Zainul Abidin was one who was known to help the poor. in the events after the event of Karbala, there were Yazid ibn Muawiyah Mal'un, his khilafat lasts for 3 years. The first year he's responsible for the killing of Imam Hussein. The second year he's responsible for something called Waqiyat al-Harra. Waqiyat al-Harra is understood as the sacking of the city of Medina. After the sacking of the city of Medina, there was an excess amount of widows and orphans in the city of Medina. And famously, Sheikh Ja'far Ibrahimi and other ulama, I narrated it previously as that Imam Zain al-Abidin cared for over 100 families all the time. He took the responsibility of taking care of 100 families. Sheikh Ja'far Ibrahimi narrates over 400 families. He says, I say on his responsibility, that over 400 families had their complete sustenance on a day-to-day process provided by none other than Imam Zain al-Abidin. Yani, that Imam, one, wouldn't cry for himself, because إِنَّمَا أَشْكُ بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. The Imam's job is not to complain to the people of what has happened to him. His job is to complain to Allah and to take care of the poor. So why was he crying? Let's get back to that in a second. Let's take a look at the next verse. Verse 87. يَا بَنِيَّ إِذْهَبْ فَتَحَسَّسُوا مِنْ يُوسُفَ وَأَخِيهِ. After Nabi Yaqub is given this news and he knows that Yusuf alayhi salam is alive and Benjamin is alive. Both are alive. He turns to the rest of his sons and he says to them, يَا بَنِيَّ إِذْهَبُوا فَتَحَسَّسُوا مِنْ يُوسُفَ وَأَخِيهِ. Go, my sons go and search. فَتَحَسَّسُوا, search. Hisas is your senses, فَتَحَسَّسُوا, use your senses to search. مِنْ يُوسُفَ وَأَخِيهِ. This statement surprises the rest of the sons of Nabi Yaqub. Think about it. Yaqub has been gone for over 20 years. Yusuf has been gone for over 20 years. Now all of a sudden their dad is telling them, go find Yusuf. They're surprised by this. They can't imagine or believe that Yusuf is still alive. Why is their father telling them to go look for both of them? And the verse continues, وَلَا تَيْأَسُوا مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ. And don't lose hope in the mercy of Allah. إِنَّهُ لَا يَيْأَسُوا مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْقَوْمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. That certainly no one loses hope in the mercy of Allah except for the disbelieving people. Now this is an interesting point. We're going to take an aside. Are you guys okay? We're going to take another aside. But this is important. This statement that Nabi Yaqub makes, don't lose hope in the mercy of Allah. His sons are of the belief that 20 years ago, we did away with Yusuf. Yusuf is no more. Why is our father telling us to go look for Yusuf? And Nabi Yaqub, not revealing everything that he knows, says to them, don't lose hope in the mercy of Allah. You see, losing hope in the mercy of Allah is one of the great sins. When we talk about major sins, one of the major sins in Islam is ya'as, to lose hope in Allah. To lose hope in Allah is to say that I'm in such a condition or state that Allah doesn't possess the ability to forgive me. Who are we to say that Allah doesn't possess the ability to forgive me? It's an affront to Allah that Allah can't forgive me. Now, there's one thing to do this intentionally, but many of us do this unintentionally. Many of us do this unintentionally. We lose hope in the mercy of Allah. Have you ever heard, for example, a child who says, well, I'm going to hell anyway? This is a common thing that children will say. Or, well, I'm going to get punished anyway. Why? Why can't Allah be merciful? Allah has the ability to be merciful. And there are many narrations, khususan one will share. Are you guys okay? From our fourth Imam, Ali ibn al-Husayn Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam. This narration proves never lose hope in the mercy of Allah. The famous narration comes that a man came to our fourth Imam and he said to him, Ya ibn Rasulullah, I worry that Allah won't forgive me. He can't forgive me. Imam Zain al-Abidin says, Allah can forgive everyone. He says, no, but Yabna Rasulullah, I've done some things that Allah won't forgive me. And the Imam doesn't ask him, what did you do? Doesn't ask him to announce his sin, and that's the same thing. Don't announce your sins. Return back to Allah. Bring your complaints to Allah, not to people. People don't need to know what you did wrong. Allah needs to know what you did wrong. Imam Zain al-Abidin says, Allah can forgive you. He says, no, but son of the Prophet, I was one of those who was present with Umar Sa'd and responsible for the murder of your father. Just can Allah forgive me? Imam Zain al-Abidin replies, he says, even this Allah can forgive you. He says, how? How can Allah forgive this? And Imam Zain al-Abidin explains, he says, after Salat al-Maghrib, there is a 2 rakat salat known as Salat al-Khufayla. If you recite this salat, and in its qunut you recite the dua and you ask Allah for forgiveness, Allah can forgive even this. Now there's a lesson here. First and foremost, never lose hope in the mercy of Allah. The second is simply asking for forgiveness without the action of seeking forgiveness will not be accepted. Imam didn't just say, okay, Allah will forgive you. No. You have to do the talab. You have to put in the work and the effort to seek that forgiveness. You have to put in the mehna. It's not enough that I know what the right action to do is, or that khalas, I know this exists, now I will be forgiven for my deeds. Until I bring the deed to action, there's no benefit to me. Which is why this hadith continues afterwards, that after this man leaves with this instruction, Salatul Khufayla, by the way, is one of the secrets of the lovers of Ahlul Bayt. This is a 2 rakat prayer that you should recite after Salatul Maghrib. In the first rakat after Surah Fatiha, you recite verse 87 and 88 of Surah Anbiya, which refers back to Dhannun, وَالظَّنُّونَ إِذْ ذَهَبَ مَغَاضِبًا فظن أن لن نقدر عليه فنادى في الظلمات أن لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين فاستجبنا له ونجيناه من الغم وكذلك ننجي المؤمنين. Let me explain why I went through this with you. I get a little excited, okay, so you're moving forward here, all right? Verse 87 and 88 is a conversation between Nabi Yunus alayhi salam after he leaves his nation. And he believes that Allah will not punish him for leaving his nation, because he believed that the adhab of Allah was going to be sent on his nation. This story within itself is very interesting. But tonight's not the night for that discussion. But he calls out, فَنَادَى فِي الظُّلُمَاتِ. He calls out in the darkness from the belly of the whale. سُبْحَانَكَ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنْتَ سُبْحَانَكَ إِنِّي كُنْتُم مِّنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. This statement of Yunus alayhi salam, glory be to Allah, there is no God but you. Certainly I am from those who did oppression on myself. Allah replies to this dua. فَاسْتَجَبْنَا لَهُ وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْغَمِّ. We answered to Yunus and we removed from him his anguish. وَكَذَلِكَ نَجَّيْنَاهُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And we do the same for the mu'mineen. This verse contains one of the secret du'as that if you have a talab or a haja, it's the du'a by which Nabi Yunus receives the mercy of Allah. How can you imagine that you or I wouldn't receive the mercy of Allah from this lesson? Sallu ala Muhammad. So this Salatul Khufayla, 2 rakat. Imam Zain al-Abidin gives the instruction that even one who was responsible for the murder of my father, by using this wasila, even he could have been forgiven. Now famously, as the hadith continues, as I mentioned, let's say that Zainab says to her nephew, she says, oh nephew, you gave him, one who was responsible for the murder of your father, you taught him how to receive the mercy of Allah? Imam Zain al-Abidin replies, he says, oh aunt, we are the authority of Allah on this world, on this earth. It is our job to give guidance to everyone. But we also know who will follow our guidance. Meaning the Imam is saying, I am the teacher, I am the one who is appointed by Allah to educate. I will educate. I will fulfill my duty to Allah. But I also know that the one who is listening to me, will he be able to accept the guidance of Allah or not? Will he put it into practice or not? This is why it's very important we pay attention in the Quran when it says, for example, wal-Asr, I swear by time, innal insana lafi khusr, that certainly man is at a loss, illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat. It's not enough that you know when you have this faith inside of you, you have to bring it into practice. Allah is giving instruction. Everyone is at loss except those who keep faith and do good deeds. Action and faith have to come together. Simply knowing the truth is not enough. Simply saying I love Ahlul Bayt is not enough. It has to come into practice or it won't work. Which is why never lose hope in the mercy of Allah as long as you put in the work to be able to apply it. Which is why Nabi Yaqub, when he sees his sons and he says to them, go find Yusuf, and they look at him hopelessly. Where are we going to find Yusuf? How can we find Yusuf? He's been gone 20 years. He's dead. Allah says that Yaqub says to his family, وَلَا تَيْأَسُوا مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ. Don't lose hope in the mercy of Allah. Certainly no one loses hope in the mercy of Allah إِلَّا الْقَوْمُ الْكَافِرُونَ, except for the disbelieving nation. So one of the lessons from the story of Nabi Yaqub that we have, that's a very important lesson, is never lose hope in the mercy of Allah. And this again comes back to Imam Zain al-Abidin that we'll explain tomorrow. But tonight, when we understand that the story of Nabi Yaqub is one where he, as one of the criers, is not crying to people. He himself is saying, my crying is only for Allah. Then why do we see Imam Zain al-Abidin crying? And his crying is famous. This points back to one of the responsibilities of this Imam. You see, Imam Zain al-Abidin's responsibility for this 34 years was not just to keep the message that Imam Hussein was martyred alive. One is to say that someone was martyred, and that's the end of the story. The other is to explain the condition in which they were martyred. Imam Zain al-Abidin, he had the responsibility to keep alive the image in which Imam Hussein was martyred. His goal, his responsibility was not that today we remember, yes, there was the grandson of the Prophet and he was killed. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. His responsibility was to ensure that the description and the difficulty of Abu Abdullah doesn't leave the minds and the hearts of the people. His crying was to explain that when you hear the name of Imam Hussein, tears should come to your eyes. Because of the shahadat of Imam Hussein is unlike anything else. Inna liwaladi al-Hussein fi qulub al-mu'minina hararatun lan tabraduha abada. Certainly for my son Hussein in the hearts of the believers is a fire that will never go out. The statement of our Prophet was to educate us that the events of Karbala would be something that have an impact. One of the responsibilities of this Imam was to ensure that this impact remains. Which is why when you see the speeches of Imam Zain al-Abidin, whether you look in Kufa, you look in Sham, you look in Medina, the beauty of the speech of the Imam is something special, and this is a separate analysis. We're opening many doors tonight. But this, look at his speech, he never repeats the same description of what happened in Karbala. In Kufa, he explains it one way, that I am the son of the one whose head was raised high on a spear. In Sham, he explains it, I am the son of the one, muzammilun bidamihi, who was wrapped in a cloak of his own blood. When he comes to Medina, he explains, I am the son of the one whose women were paraded through the streets of Kufa and Shah. Imam Zainul Abidin's crying was to make sure that till today, you don't just think that Abu Abdullah was someone who died, but that you remember that the masa'ib of Abu Abdullah were unlike anything that has been seen between the heavens and the earth before. This was his purpose. My Imam's action is not wasteful. It's not selfish. It's to ensure that people know that they need to change and they need to be attached to the message of Imam Hussein. Which is why, when Abu Hamza comes to him and he says, قَتَلَكُمْ عَادًا وَكَرَامَتُكُمْ مِنَ اللَّهِ شَهَادًا, that, oh Ibn Rasulullah, for you death is normal, and shahadat is an honor that your family has from Allah. When does Abu Hamza say this statement? Because every day when my Imam would open his fast and food and water would be brought before him, Imam Zainul Abidin would look at this food and water and he would say, how shall I drink this water? My father was killed thirsty. How shall I eat this bread? My father was killed hungry. They would say he would weep so much that the water would become salty from his tears and the bread would become soft. Abu Hamza, looking at this, couldn't bear it anymore. He says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, ila mata? Until when will you cry? We imagine Imam Zainul Abidin must have replied, oh Abu Hamza, yes, it's true. Death is normal for us. Shahadat is an honor for us. But Abu Hamza, where is the honor in having your father's chest run over by horses in front of you? Where is the honor in seeing your women run from tent to tent? Imam Zainul Abidin describes the night of Ashura. The children and women of Abu Abdullah were spread in the field of Karbala the way you take a tasbih and its beads are broken in the ground. That image lived in the mind of my Imam that he said, oh Abu Hamza, where is the honor in seeing your mothers and your aunts disgraced? Where is the honor in seeing your brother like Asghar raised on a spear? Imam Zainul Abidin explained these attributes not just to Abu Hamza. There are many descriptions where the Imam made sure that people understood how to cry over Abu Abdullah, where, for example, he would go through the market and pass by the market of the butchers. If he happened to see a butcher about to slaughter a sheep, he would turn and say, oh butcher, before you slaughter the sheep, did you give it water? He would say, Ibn Rasulullah, we give a sheep water 3 times before we slaughter it. He would turn in the direction of Karbala and call, Assalamu alayka ya Abu Abdullah. They treat the sheep better than they treated you. Oh, my father killed thirsty next to the side of Furat. Imam Zainul Abidin ensured that this message would not die. But the masa'ib of my Imam were nothing less. To the extent was the impact of his crying that eventually the Banu Umayyah had to poison him. When they poisoned him, Imam Baqir was the one who did his ghusl, and when he does the ghusl of his father, Jabir al-Ju'fi is there to accompany Imam al-Baqir. And as Imam al-Baqir does the ghusl and he turns the side of his father, Jabir says, I saw my Imam turn his face and begin crying. I said, Ya ibn Rasulullah, what made you cry? He says, oh Jabir, I see on my father 3 things. 1, I see in his side and liver the impact of the poison has changed the color of his body. 2, Jabir, I see on the neck of my father the marks of that collar and the chains that they put in his neck. Jabir, when I turned my father, I saw on his back the marks of the abuse of shimmer my father bore for so many years. Imam al-Baqir, with all due respect, you saw the chest of your father and you cried. Why, Imam Zainul Abidin, on the 13th of Muharram, when he goes to bury Abu Abdullah, they said he tried to lift Abu Abdullah. The body of Abu Abdullah came apart in pieces. Imam Zainul Abidin in pain called out, O Banu Asad, have you no cloth? Have you no mat that I can collect my father's body to bury him? Wa Husayna, wa Asad. Ya Hussein.
दयारे शाम में सजा दिया रहा होगा दयारे शाम में सजा दिया रहा होगा उड़ी है खाक असीरों का काफिला होगा उड़ी है खाक असीरों का काफिला होगा अली के कूफे में कोई सरों को ढापेगा अली के कूफे में कोई सरों को ढापेगा हर एक चेहरे को सजा तो देखता होगा दया रे शाम में जब आया बज़ में शराबी में नाम ज़ैनब का जब आया बज़ में शराबी में नाम ज़ैनब का पसर हुसैन का बेमौत मर गया होगा दया रे शाम में या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन अपनी या हुसैन 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 ला दे या हुसैन
वो खून रूह के ये कहता रहा ज़माने से वो खून रूह के ये कहता रहा ज़माने से वो खून रूह के ये कहता रहा ज़माने से वो खून रूह के कहता से
वो खून रोके ये कहता रहा ज़माने से
वो खून रोके
कहता रहा ज़माने से
हृदय छीनो ना, हृदय छीनो ना लोगों मेरे घराने से वो खून रोके कहता रहा ज़माने से
वो खून रोके ये कहता रहा ज़माने से
वो खून रोके सवाल अब पे रोने पे उसके सोने पे, सवाल अब पे रोने पे उसके सोने पे वो मारते थे, वो मारते थे सकीना को हर बहाने से वो खून रोके कहता रहा ज़माने से
खून रोके कहता रहा ज़माने से
हृदय छीनो ना, हृदय छीनो ना लोगों मेरे घराने से वो खून रोके कहता
रहा ज़माने से
वो खून रोके
कहता रहा ज़माने से
सुलाया जाता था बेहोश करके दुर्रों से, सुलाया जाता था बेहोश करके दुर्रों से, जगाया जाता था, जगाया जाता था बिद को ताज़ियाने से वो खून रोके कहता माने से
वो खून रोके कहता रहा ज़माने
से वो खून रोके
कहता रहा ज़माने से
बुलात किस तरह बास को मदद के लिए, बुलात किस तरह बास को मदद के लिए वो बेरदा थी, वो बेरदा थी झिझकती रही बुलाने से वो खून रोके कहता ज़माने से वो खून रोके
कहता रहा ज़माने से
सवाल अब पे रोने पे उसके सोने पे, सवाल अब पे रोने पे उसके सोने पे वो मारते थे, वो मारते थे सकीना को हर बहाने से वो खून रोके
कहता रहा ज़माने से वो खून
रोके
कहता रहा ज़माने से
वो खून रोके
कहता रहा ज़माने से
हृदय सानिए ज़हरा में ढल गया अकबर, हृदय सानिए ज़हरा में ढल गया अकबर, गुबार उठा, गुबार उठा जो लाशों के थरथराने से वो खून रोके
कहता रहा ज़माने से वो खून रोके कहता
की घड़ी याद रहेगी, सज्जाद को वो गम की घड़ी याद रहेगी,
सज्जाद को वो गम की घड़ी याद रहेगी,
सज्जाद को वो गम की घड़ी याद रहेगी, सज्जाद को वो गम
की घड़ी याद रहेगी,
वो शाम वो कूफे की गली, वो शाम वो कूफे की गली याद रहेगी, सज्जाद को वो गम की घड़ी याद रहेगी,
सज्जाद को वो गम की घड़ी याद रहेगी,
सज्जाद को वो गम
की घड़ी याद रहेगी,
दरवाज़ाए ज़हरा तो कभी खैमाए शबीर, दरवाज़ाए ज़हरा तो कभी खैमाए शबीर, शोलों में गिरिया ले नबी, शोलों में गिरिया ले नबी याद रहेगी, सज्जाद को वो गम की घड़ी याद रहेगी,
सज्जाद को वो गम की घड़ी याद रहेगी,
सज्जाद को वो गम
की घड़ी याद रहेगी,
शबीर को अकबर का जिगर याद रहेगा, शबीर को अकबर का जिगर याद रहेगा, ज़ैनब की वो खैमों में गशी, ज़ैनब की वो खैमों में गशी याद रहेगी, सज्जाद को वो गम की घड़ी याद रहेगी, सज्जाद को वो गम
की घड़ी याद रहेगी,
वो शाम वो कूफे की गली, वो शाम वो कूफे की गली याद रहेगी, सज्जाद को वो गम
की घड़ी याद रहेगी,
गठड़ी को लिए गोद में कहती रही फरवा, गठड़ी को लिए गोद में कहती रही फरवा, बेटा तेरे सहरे की लड़ी, बेटा तेरे सहरे की लड़ी याद रहेगी, सज्जाद को वो गम की घड़ी याद रहेगी,
सज्जाद को वो गम की घड़ी याद रहेगी,
वो शाम वो कूफे की गली, वो शाम वो कूफे की गली याद रहेगी, सज्जाद को वो गम
की घड़ी याद रहेगी,
जिस वक्त मिलेगा हमें पैमाना कौसर, जिस वक्त मिलेगा हमें पैमाना कौसर, शबीर तेरी तशना लबी, शबीर तेरी तशना लबी याद रहेगी, सज्जाद को वो गम की घड़ी याद रहेगी,
सज्जाद को वो गम की घड़ी याद रहेगी,
हाय मेरा बीमार इमाम, हाय मेरा बीमार इमाम, हाय मेरा बीमार बाद कत्ले शाहे अनाम, बाद कत्ले हाय रे गुर्बत की वो शाम, हाय रे गुर्बत की वो शाम, गश में पड़ा है तशना काम, हो जाए गम से न तमाम, हाय मेरा बीमार इमाम, बीमार इमाम, हाय मेरा बीमार इमाम, हाय मेरा दुर्र हैं ताज़ीरे हैं, दुर्र हैं ताज़ीरे, पाँव में जंजीरे हैं, दुर्र हैं ताज़ीरे हैं, पाँव में जंजीरे, हाथों में तकदीरें हैं, चलना है मुश्किल दो काम, हाय मेरा बीमार इमाम, हाय मेरा बीमार इमाम, जख्म लहू बरसाता है, जख्म लहू बरसाता है, दिल है के छल का आता है, दिल है के छल का दुर्र खाता जाता है, लम्हा लम्हा गाम बगाम, हाय मेरा बीमार इमाम, हाय मेरा बीमार इमाम, माओ बहनों के चेहरे, बालों के पीछे हैं छुपे, बालों के पीछे हाथ बंधे हैं, सर है खुले, सामने है एक मजमा-ए-आम, हाय मेरा हाय मेरा बीमार, मजमा सारा हंसता है, दिल का जहर उगलता है, दिल का जहर उगलता है, खून के आंसू रोता है, सर को झुकाए तशना काम, हाय मेरा बीमार इमाम, हाय मेरा बीमार इमाम, ओ मेरा बाब ये लैला है, ये कुलसूम ये कुबरा है, ये कुलसूम ये कुबरा है, ये मासूम सकीना है, और है ज़ैनब इसका नाम, हाय मेरा बीमार इमाम, हाय मेरा बीमार इमाम, हाय मेरा बीमार इमाम, हाय मेरा बीमार इमाम, सल्ले अला मुहम्मद हुसैन, या हुसैन, या हुसैन, या हुसैन,
फिर फातिमा के घर में फर्श अज़ा बिछा है, बीमार करबला का ताबूत उठ रहा है। फिर फातिमा के घर में फर्श अज़ा बिछा है, बीमार करबला का ताबूत फिर फातिमा के घर में फर्श अज़ा बिछा है, बीमार करबला का ताबूत उठ रहा है। फिर फातिमा के घर में फर्श अज़ा बिछा है, करबला का ताबूत उठ रहा है। करबो बला का जख्मी यसरब में चल बसा है, बीमार करबला का ताबूत उठ रहा है। फिर फातिमा के घर में अज़ा बिछा है, बीमार करबला का ताबूत उठ रहा है। हाय ज़ेरे कफन भी उसकी आँखों से खून है जारी, याद आ रही है गुर्बत सज्जाद को पदर की। रोज़े से मुस्तफ़ा के ऐलान हो रहा है, बीमार करबला का ताबूत उठ रहा है। फिर फातिमा के घर में फर्श अज़ा बिछा है, बीमार करबला का ताबूत उठ रहा है। फिर फातिमा के घर में फर्श अज़ा बिछा है, बीमार करबला का ताबूत उठ रहा है। हाय बाकिर से कह रहा था सादात का घराना, पहलू में ना जाके मैयत ना लेके जाना। पहले भी एक जनाजा घर वापस आ चुका है, बीमार करबला का ताबूत उठ रहा है। फिर फातिमा के घर में फर्श अज़ा बिछा है, बीमार करबला का ताबूत उठ रहा है। फिर फातिमा के घर में फर्श अज़ा बिछा है, बीमार करबला का ताबूत उठ रहा है। हाय अब तो मदीने वालों तुमको सुकून रहेगा, रोएगा और न इसकी आँखों से खून बहेगा। बाबा को रोने वाला खामोश हो गया है, बीमार करबला का ताबूत उठ रहा है। फिर फातिमा के घर में फर्श अज़ा बिछा है, बीमार करबला का ताबूत उठ रहा है। करबो बला का जख्मी यसरब में चल बसा है, बीमार करबला का ताबूत उठ रहा है। फिर फातिमा के घर में सजा 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 सजा
अस्सलामु अलैका या इब्ना रसूलल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैका या इब्ना अमीरुल मोमिनीन व इब्ना सय्यदुल वसीयीन, अस्सलामु अलैका या इब्ना फातिमतुज़ ज़हरा सय्यदते निसाइल आलमीन, अस्सलामु अलल हुसैन व अला अली इब्निल हुसैन व अला औलादिल हुसैन व अला अस्हाबिल हुसैन। अस्सलामु अलैकुम जमीअन व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू। अस्सलामु अलैका या मौला या गरीबुल गुरबा, अस्सलामु अलैका या मुईनुज़ ज़ुफ़ा'i वल फ़ुक़रा, अस्सलामु अलैका या मुग़ीस शिय्यति व ज़ुव्वार फ़ी यौमिल जज़ा, अस्सलामु अलैका या शम्स शमूस व या अनीस नफूस, अस्सलामु अलैका या अय्युहल मदफून बिअर्ज़ तूस, सुल्तान अल-अरब वल अजम, या अबल हसन या अली इब्न मूसा रज़ा, अर्राज़ी बिल क़द्र वल क़ज़ा, अलैका तहियत व सना व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकात। अस्सलामु अलैका या मौला या साहिबल अस्र वल अम्र वज़ ज़मान, अल-अमान 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 मिन फितनतिज़ ज़मान। अस्सलामु अलैका या हुज्जतुर रहमान, अस्सलामु अलैका या खलीफतुर रहमान, अस्सलामु अलैका या शरीकल कुरआन, अस्सलामु अलैका या मज़हरल ईमान, अस्सलामु अलैका या कामिल कुफ्र तुग़यान, अस्सलामु अलैका या दाफ़िअ ज़ुल्म व उद्वान, अस्सलामु अलैका या इमाम अल-इंस वल जान, अजलल्लाहु तआला फ़रजक व सहलल्लाहु तआला मख़रजक वजअलना मिन अंसारिक व अवानिक व शियतिक व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू। अल्लाहुम्मा
अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मद व आलि मुहम्मद। मुमिनीन, कल 5 बजे यहाँ पे लेडीज़ की मजलिस होगी और बाद मगरिबैन मर्दाना मजलिस होगी। आप सबसे शिरकत की इस्तदा है। संडे स्कूल कल 10 बजे 10:30 बजे से 12 बजे तक होगा। प्लीज़ तशरीफ़ लाइएगा। खुदा हाफ़िज़।